The dust swirled thick behind Silverbrook's only saloon on that scorching August afternoon in 1885. But it couldn't hide what Cole Mitchell saw when he rounded the corner to water his horse. A child, no more than 12 years old, stood tied to a weathered fence post like a scarecrow left to rot in the sun. Her bare feet were caked with mud. Her thin arms stretched above her head, and her wrists bore the angry red marks of rope that had cut too deep for too long. Cole Mitchell had seen plenty of cruelty in his 40 years on this earth. He'd fought in wars, buried a wife, and learned that the world could break a man in ways he never expected. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the sight of that little girl standing silent and still, while grown men gambled away her future like she was nothing more than livestock. What happened next would challenge everything the people of Silverbrook thought they knew about justice, family, and what it truly meant to save someone's life. This is the incredible true story of Emma Rose, a child who'd been sold to pay her father's gambling debts, and Cole Mitchell, the broken-hearted rancher who chose to see her worth when everyone else saw only property. The Wyoming Territory in 1885 was still wild enough that a man could disappear into its vastness and never be found or never want to be. Cole had chosen this isolation after losing his beloved wife Mary to consumption 3 years earlier. His ranch Mitchell homestead sat 20 miles northwest of Silverbrook, nestled between two protective ridges that kept the world at arm's length. Cole stood 6 feet 2 inches in his worn leather boots, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of sorrow, and hands calloused from the kind of work that kept grief at bay during daylight hours. His dark hair showed premature gray at the temples, and his gray eyes held the careful distance of a man who'd learned that carrying too much could cost everything. He'd ridden into Silverbrook that day for supplies and tool repairs, a routine trip he made monthly to maintain his connection to civilization without getting too close to its complications. The plan was simple. Drop off dull blades at the blacksmith, pick up coffee and flour at the Mercantile. Maybe share a drink with the few men who still remembered him from before he became a ghost haunting his own life. But fate had other plans. The crowd behind the saloon was small but ugly. The kind of men who gathered when someone else's misery promised entertainment. They weren't all bidding on Emma Rose. Most were just curious about the spectacle of a man desperate enough to use his own child as collateral in a poker game gone wrong. But their presence made the whole scene feel like a carnival where the main attraction was human suffering. Cole's horse had stopped before he'd even pulled the reins, as if the animal could sense something fundamentally wrong with the scene before them. For a long moment, Cole sat in the saddle, watching and listening, trying to understand how a world that claimed to value innocence could allow something so barbaric to happen in broad daylight. The girl, Emma Rose, though Cole didn't know her name yet, never lifted her head. She stood with the resigned stillness of someone who'd learned that fighting only made the pain worse. Her dress was little more than rags. Her hair hung in unwashed tangles, and everything about her posture spoke of a spirit that had been systematically broken by people who should have protected her. $12 for the girl, called out a voice from the crowd. 1 week's labor or permanent. Your choice. She's small, but she don't eat much and won't give you trouble. The man doing the selling was thin and sour-smelling with the desperate energy of someone whose luck had run out long ago. He tugged on Emma's rope like she was livestock, grinning with teeth that were more gaps than enamel as he tried to drum up interest from the sparse crowd. She can clean, cook a little, and she's stronger than she looks, he continued. Silent as a stone, too. Won't talk back or cause problems. Cole felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest as he listened to a child being sold like a piece of farm equipment. This wasn't just wrong. It was evil, pure, and simple. And in that moment, Cole Mitchell made a decision that would change 2 lives forever. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dusty ground with deliberate purpose. Without a word, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked with the weight of honest money earned through honest work. $15, Cole said quietly, his voice cutting through the crowd's murmur like a blade through silk. The seller's eyes lit up with greed. You want her for the week? No, Cole replied, his gray eyes steady and cold. Permanent. But I'm not buying her. I'm settling your debt. There's a difference. The man's grin widened as he caught the coins Cole tossed him. Same result, mister. She's yours now. But Cole was already moving, pulling his pocket knife and cutting the ropes that bound Emma Rose to the post. Her arms fell too fast, and she staggered as circulation returned to her limbs. Cole caught her, not roughly, but not tenderly either. She looked up at him with eyes that held no hope, no gratitude, no emotion at all. Just the hollow acceptance of someone who'd learned that one master was much the same as another. "Can you write?" Cole asked quietly. Emma nodded once, a quick economical movement that spoke of a child who'd learned to conserve energy for survival. They left Silverbrook under a sky-threatening storm. Emma riding Cole's pack mule while he led his horse on foot. She didn't sit behind him. Cole had enough sense to know that a child who'd been through what she'd endured would need space and time to trust again. She clung to the saddle horn with white-knuckled fingers and kept her face turned away from the road, as if looking back might somehow drag her into the nightmare she was leaving behind. Dust rose behind them like ghosts, reluctant to let go. And somewhere in that swirling cloud of earth and memory, Emma Rose began the long journey from victim to survivor. She didn't know it yet, but the man walking beside her mule had just given her something more valuable than freedom. He'd given her the chance to remember what it felt like to be treated like a human being. The Mitchell homestead appeared before them as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, and for the first time in longer than she could remember. Emma Rose looked ahead instead of behind. The Mitchell homestead sat in a valley protected by two rocky ridges, where cottonwoods grew thick along a creek that ran clear and cold even in the driest summers. The main house was modest but well-built, with a stone chimney that spoke of warm fires, and windows that caught the last light of day like golden promises. A barn weathered to silver gray stood nearby, and beyond it pastures where cattle grazed in the peaceful rhythm of a life lived close to the land. Emma Rose took it all in with the careful assessment of someone who'd learned to evaluate each new place for potential dangers and escape routes. She saw the unlocked doors, the absence of bars on windows, the way Cole moved with the easy confidence of a man who had nothing to hide and no one to fear. Cole led her into the house without ceremony, pointing to a cot near the fireplace that was already made up with clean blankets and a pillow that smelt of lavender instead of fear. A pot of beans bubbled on the stove, filling the small space with warmth and the promise of a meal eaten sitting down instead of grabbed between punishments. "That's yours," Cole said simply, nodding toward the cot. "You hungry?" Emma nodded once. The same careful movement that conserved energy and drew no unnecessary attention. Cole ladled beans into a tin bowl and set it on the wooden table along with a spoon and a chunk of bread that was still warm from the oven. "Take your time," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "No one's going to take it away." Emma sat, but didn't immediately reach for the spoon. She stared at the food as if it might vanish or transform into something else. A punishment, a trick, a test she was destined to fail. When she finally picked up the spoon, her movements were slow and deliberate. The actions of someone who'd forgotten what it meant to eat without fear. The first taste made her flinch. Not from heat, but from flavor. Real flavor. Rich and warm and filling. Cole realized with a pang that she'd been surviving on scraps for so long that a simple bowl of beans tasted like a feast. She didn't finish the bowl, setting down the spoon when she was only halfway done, and looking up at Cole with something that might have been shame. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might bring punishment down on both of them. "You can have more if you want it," Cole said gently. "There's plenty." Emma shook her head quickly. "I should save some for later." The words hit Cole like a physical blow. This child had been living with such uncertainty that she couldn't imagine there would be another meal tomorrow or the day after that. She'd been conditioned to hoard, to fear, to expect deprivation at every turn. "There will be more later," Cole said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. Not at her, but at everyone who taught her to think this way. "There will be breakfast tomorrow and lunch and dinner." Every day, Emma stared at him as if he just claimed the sun would rise in the west. Trust was clearly not something that came easily to someone who'd been betrayed by every adult who should have protected her. Cole stood and poured himself coffee, looking out the window as if the vast Wyoming landscape might offer answers to questions he wasn't sure how to ask. "I don't lock doors," he said finally. "Never have. If you want to leave, no one's stopping you." But if you stay, you're safe here. Emma nodded, but didn't move from her chair. She seemed frozen between disbelief and desperate hope, as if accepting his words might somehow jinx the fragile possibility of safety he was offering. "What do I call you?" Cole asked, returning to his seat. The question seemed to surprise her. She was quiet for so long that Cole thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Emma." Emma rose. "That's a good name," Cole said, and meant I'm Cole Mitchell. "This is my place." Emma nodded, filing away this information with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that survival often depended on remembering details that others might overlook. As the evening wore on, Cole busied himself with small tasks, banking the fire, checking the windows, preparing for the night routine of a man who lived alone. Emma watched his every movement, cataloging his habits, looking for signs of the volatility that she'd learned to expect from the men who controlled her fate. But Cole moved with the steady patience of someone who had nothing to prove and no anger to unleash. He spoke quietly when he spoke at all, his words chosen carefully and delivered without threat or demand. When he handed Emma a washcloth and pointed toward the basin of warm water he'd prepared, it was an offer, not an order. "You can clean up if you want," he said. "There's soap there and a clean dress that might fit better than what you're wearing." Emma looked at the dress, simple blue cotton that had once belonged to Cole's wife. And something in her expression shifted. Not quite hope, but perhaps the absence of despair. "It was my wife's," Cole said quietly. "She'd have wanted someone to get use out of it." "Where is she?" Emma asked the first question she'd volunteered since arriving. "Died 3 years ago." "Consumption." Emma nodded with the solemn understanding of someone who'd learned early that loss was a constant companion. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." They were quiet after that, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the heavy quiet of fear, but the lighter stillness of two people learning to be comfortable in each other's presence. When Emma finally went to wash, Cole stepped outside to tend to the animals and give her privacy. The evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of sage and grass. And somewhere in the distance, a night bird called to its mate with a song that spoke of home and safety and all the simple things that made life worth living. When Cole returned to the house, Emma was curled on the cot wearing the blue dress, which was too large but clean. She'd braided her hair back from her face, revealing features that spoke of intelligence and strength beneath the careful mask of submission she'd learned to wear. "Dress fits well enough," Cole observed. Emma smoothed the fabric with hands that shook slightly. "It's the nicest thing I ever wore." The simple statement broke something open in Cole's chest. This child, this brave, broken child, had been living a life so bare of kindness that a simple cotton dress felt like luxury. "Well," he said, settling into his chair by the fire, "you'll have nicer things in time. Good things come to people who've earned them." Emma looked at him with those two old eyes. "How do you know I've earned them?" "Because you're still here," Cole said simply. "Because you survived what would have broken most people. And you did it with grace." "That's earned," Emma rose. "That's earned 10 times over." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. And when Cole woke up briefly in the middle of the night to check the fire, he saw that she was sleeping peacefully for the first time in longer than either of them could remember. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang through the cottonwoods with a sound like whispered promises. Inside the warm house, a healing had begun, slow and tentative, but real. Two broken souls had found each other in the vast wilderness of grief and loss. And together they were learning that sometimes the most profound rescues happened not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet offering of safety, dignity, and hope. Emma Rose didn't know it yet, but she was home. Morning came gentle to the Mitchell homestead with sunlight filtering through the windows like honey poured slow and golden. Emma awoke before dawn, not from nightmares this time, but from the simple rhythm of someone whose body had learned to rise with the sun as a matter of survival. She lay still on the cot, listening to the sounds of a house at peace, the soft crackle of dying embers in the fireplace, the distant lowing of cattle, and somewhere outside, the steady rhythm of an axe splitting wood. Cole was already up working in the barn when Emma finally ventured outside. She found him mucking stalls with the methodical patience of a man who found comfort in routine work. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, her bare feet silent on the dirt floor. "Morning," he said simply, not stopping his work. "Coffee's on the stove if you want some. Bread's in the tin." Emma nodded, but didn't immediately return to the house. Instead, she stood watching Cole work, noting how he moved around the animals with quiet confidence, how his voice gentled when he spoke to the horses. How he treated every living thing with the same careful respect. "I can help," she said finally, her voice still barely above a whisper. Cole paused, leaning on his pitchfork. "You don't have to earn your keep, Emma. Not anymore." "I know," she said, and something in her tone suggested she was beginning to believe it, "but I want to. I don't like being useless." Cole studied her face, seeing past the careful submission to the strength beneath. This child had survived by making herself valuable, by proving she was worth keeping alive. The habit would be hard to break, but maybe if he was careful, he could help her understand the difference between being useful and being valued. "All right," he said finally. "But we work together, partners." The word partners hit Emma like a physical blow. No one had ever called her that before. Partners implied equality, respect, choice. She nodded quickly, afraid that speaking might somehow break the spell. Cole showed her how to feed the chickens, how to collect eggs without frightening the hens, how to check the water troughs and mend small tears in the feed sacks. Emma absorbed every lesson with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned that knowledge was survival. But Cole could see something else in her attention. Genuine interest, even joy, in the simple act of caring for living things. They worked in comfortable silence until the sun climbed high enough to make the barn stuffy. Then Cole led her back to the house for breakfast. Real breakfast with eggs and bacon and bread thick with butter and jam. Emma ate slowly, still unable to fully believe that the food wouldn't be snatched away. But with each bite, some of the hollow desperation in her eyes began to fill. "You said you had a brother," Cole said gently, remembering fragments of whispered conversation from their first night. Emma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Hot, past tense. What happened to him?" Emma was quiet for so long that Cole thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, carefully, as if each one cost something precious. "Tommy was older, 14 when Papa lost us both in the same game." She set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "They separated us right away. Said siblings cause trouble. Try to protect each other." Cole felt that familiar cold anger settling in his chest, but he kept his voice gentle. "How long ago?" 2 years, maybe 3. Hard to keep track. Emma's fingers worried at the edge of her napkin. "I kept thinking maybe I'd see him somewhere. Maybe we'd end up in the same place," but she didn't finish the sentence, but Cole could read the rest in her expression. Hope was a luxury that children in Emma's situation couldn't afford for long. "What was he like?" Cole asked. For the first time since arriving, Emma's face lit up with something approaching a smile. "Smart. Really smart. He could read anything, solve problems nobody else could figure out. And he was funny, always making jokes, even when things were bad. Sounds like a good brother." The best. Emma's voice grew soft with memory. "He used to tell me stories at night when we were scared. Made up ones about places where kids like us could be safe, where families stayed together." Cole nodded. Filing away this information about the girl's capacity for love and loyalty despite everything she'd endured. Maybe he's still out there somewhere. Telling those stories to other kids who need them. Emma looked up sharply as if the possibility of her brother's survival was something she'd forced herself to stop considering. "You think so?" "I think smart, funny people have a way of surviving," Cole said honestly. "And I think brothers who love their sisters don't give up easy." Emma didn't respond, but something in her posture had shifted. A tiny loosening of the rigid control she maintained over hope and heartbreak. After breakfast, Cole decided to tackle repairs on the fence line, and Emma asked to come along. They rode out together on horseback. Emma on the gentle mare that had once been Mary's favorite. Cole on his sturdy gelding. Emma rode like someone who'd learned horseback was often the fastest way to escape danger, with natural balance and an intuitive understanding of the animal beneath her. The work was simple but satisfying. Replacing rotted posts, tightening wire, reinforcing weak spots that winter storms had damaged. Emma proved surprisingly helpful. Her small hands perfect for reaching tight spaces and her sharp eyes quick to spot problems Cole might have missed. "You're good at this," Cole observed as Emma expertly twisted wire around a new post. "Papa taught me some before." Emma trailed off, then started again. "Before he got so bad with the cards, he used to say, I had good hands for fixing things." He was right. They worked in comfortable silence after that, but Cole could see Emma processing something in the careful way she approached each task. Finally, as they were packing up tools, she spoke again. "Why did you take me?" she asked, her voice matter-of-fact rather than emotional. "Really? You could have just walked away." Cole considered the question seriously. It deserved an honest answer. "I saw someone drowning," he said finally. "And maybe I was drowning too, in a different way. Sometimes helping someone else is the only way to help yourself." Emma studied his weathered face, looking for deception or hidden motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded once and returned to packing the tools. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Emma did something that surprised them both. She began to hum softly, almost under her breath, a simple melody that spoke of longing and memory. It was the first time Cole had heard her make any sound that wasn't strictly necessary for communication. "What's that song?" he asked gently. Emma's humming stopped abruptly, as if she just realized she was making music. "Something Tommy used to sing." "I didn't realize I was." "It's pretty," Cole said. "Don't stop on my account." Emma looked at him uncertainly, then began humming again, a little stronger this time. The melody filled the small house with something it had been missing since Mary died. The sound of someone being unself-consciously human, making beauty simply because beauty wanted to be made. As the fire burned lower and the evening settled around them, Cole realized that something fundamental had shifted. Emma was no longer just surviving in his house. She was beginning to live in it, and for the first time in 3 years, the silence that had been his constant companion was starting to feel less like solitude and more like peace. Outside, the Wyoming wind carried the promise of changing seasons. Inside, 2 damaged souls were learning that healing didn't happen all at once. It happened in small moments, quiet gestures, and the gradual recognition that safety could be real. Kindness could be trusted, and home could be built from the simplest materials. Respect, patience, and the revolutionary idea that every person, no matter how small or broken, deserved to be treated with dignity. Emma Rose was learning to trust again. And Cole Mitchell was learning that saving someone else might just be the first step toward saving herself. 3 weeks into their new life together, trouble arrived at the Mitchell homestead with the deliberately slow approach of men who expected to be a bait. Cole saw them coming long before they reached the gate. 3 riders moving with the kind of confidence that came from believing the law was on their side. The morning had been peaceful until then, with Emma helping him repair a section of barn roof while humming that simple melody that had become the soundtrack to their healing. The sight of the approaching riders made Cole's jaw tighten with recognition and dread. He climbed down from the roof slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled, despite the cold anger beginning to build in his chest. "Emma," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off the approaching men. "Go inside." But Emma had already seen them, and something in her posture told Cole she knew exactly who was coming. She'd gone rigid with the kind of stillness that spoke of prey trying to avoid a predator's notice. "It's him, isn't it?" she whispered. "Marcus Webb." Cole's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the barn wall. "You know that name." "He's the one who really owns me," Emma said, her voice hollow with the resignation of someone who'd always known this moment would come. "Papa owed him money from way back. He let Caleb, my papa, keep me as long as the debt got paid down. But Marcus always said he'd collect eventually." The 3 men dismounted with theatrical precision. The first wore a preacher's collar, crisp and white despite the dusty rite. His eyes held the cold fire of a man who'd confused righteousness with cruelty. The second was clearly a lawman, badge glinting in the morning sun, mustache trimmed to military precision. And the third, Marcus Webb himself, moved with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no, and lived in a world where money could buy anything, including children. "Mr. Mitchell, the preacher called out, his voice carrying the practiced authority of the pulpit. I'm Reverend Blackwood. This is Deputy Carlson and Mr. Marcus Webb. We've come about the girl. Cole stepped forward, placing himself between the men and the house where Emma had reluctantly retreated. What about her? Marcus Webb spat into the dust and fixed Cole with the kind of stare that was meant to intimidate. That child is stolen property, mister. Her father owed me a considerable debt, and she was collateral. Legal collateral. She's not property, Cole said, his voice level, but carrying an undertone of danger that made smart men reconsider their approach. She's a child. Deputy Carlson stepped forward, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. Be that as it may, Mr. Mitchell, the law sees things differently. Without proper guardianship papers, you're harboring someone else's asset. Asset? Cole repeated the word like it tasted bitter. That what you call a 12-year-old girl who's been beaten and starved and sold like livestock? Reverend Blackwood's smile was as cold as winter wind. Your moral outrage is noted, sir, but irrelevant. The child was legally pledged as shady for debt. Mr. Webb has documentation. Marcus Webb reached into his coat and produced a folded paper, waving it like a flag of conquest. Bill of sale witnessed and recorded. That girl belongs to me fair and square. Cole's gray eyes had gone hard as stone. Show me. Webb handed over the document with obvious satisfaction. Cole read it carefully, his jaw tightening with each line. The paper was real enough. Legal language that reduced Emma Rose to property signed by a desperate father and witnessed by men who should have known better. This says she was collateral for a gambling debt, Cole said finally. It doesn't say anything about ownership. Debt wasn't paid, Webb replied smoothly. Call becomes property. That's how it works. Not in Wyoming territory, it doesn't. Cole folded the paper and tucked it into his own pocket. We don't recognize slavery here, documented or otherwise. Deputy Carlson's hand moved closer to his weapon. You're interfering with lawful business, Mitchell. That's a crime. What's criminal is grown men buying and selling children. Cole shot back. But since you seem to think the law matters, I'll give you 7 days to come back with a proper court order. Real paperwork, not this garbage you're waving around. Reverend Blackwood's face flushed with indignation. 7 days? You have no authority to 7 days, Cole repeated, his voice carrying the kind of finality that ended arguments. Come back with a judge's signature, or don't come back at all. Marcus Webb's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. You're making a mistake, Mitchell. That girl's been nothing but trouble since the day she was born. Father drank himself to death trying to forget he had her. Mother ran off when she couldn't take the shame anymore. Nobody wants her except his cheap labor. Cole took a step forward and something in his movement made all 3 men tense. Get off my land. 7 days, Deputy Carlson said, trying to salvage some authority from the situation. But after that, if you're still harboring stolen property, I'll arrest you myself. They mounted up and rode away, but the threat hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Cole watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to find Emma standing in the doorway, her face pale but determined. I heard, she said simply. Cole nodded. Figured you would. They'll come back and next time they'll bring papers that look real enough to fool most folks. Probably. Emma stepped onto the porch, her small hands clenched into fists. I won't go back to him. I'd rather die first. The quiet conviction in her voice hit Cole harder than any threat Webb could have made. This child, this brave, broken child, had found something worth fighting for, and she was prepared to die rather than lose it again. You won't have to, Cole said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. We'll figure something out. How? You heard them. They've got law on their side, documentation, witnesses. What do we have? Cole looked at her, standing there in the blue dress that had once been Mary's, her chin raised in defiance, despite the fear in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. What they had was simple but powerful truth, justice, and the unshakable belief that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. We have time, he said finally. 7 days to find another way. That evening, Cole rode into Silverbrook alone, leaving Emma with strict instructions to stay in sight and keep the rifle close. The town that had seemed merely rough around the edges during his previous visit now felt actively hostile. As if word of Webb's claim had already begun to spread through the saloon gossip and courthouse hangers-on. Cole's first stop was the telegraph office, where he sent urgent messages to every lawyer, judge, and territorial official he could think of. Most would probably ignore him, but it only took one sympathetic ear to start building a case for Emma's freedom. His second stop was more personal. Tom Bradley, his nearest neighbor, and one of the few men in the territory Cole trusted, lived on a spread 5 miles south of town. Tom had fought alongside Cole in the territorial conflicts of the 70s, and his word carried weight with the kind of men who valued honor over legal technicalities. "They'll be back," Cole told Tom over coffee in the rancher's kitchen. "And when they come, they'll have papers that look official enough to fool most folks." Tom nodded grimly. Webb's got connections in Denver, judges who owe him favors. Won't be hard for him to get something that passes for legal. "So, what do we do?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if answers might be floating in the dark liquid. "Well," he said finally, "seems to me the law's got 2 sides. Webb's side, which is about money and documentation, and our side, which is about doing what's right." "Our side." Tom looked up with the kind of smile that had gotten them both into trouble during their army days. "You didn't think you were fighting this alone, did you? That girl's got more friends in this territory than Webb does, and some of us have been waiting for an excuse to remind him that money can't buy everything." As Cole rode home under a star-filled sky, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope backed by the knowledge that he wasn't facing this fight alone. Emma Rose had found more than just a home at the Mitchell homestead. She'd found a community willing to stand between her and the men who saw her as property. The next 7 days would test every one of them. But for the first time since Webb's visit, Cole allowed himself to believe that justice might just have a chance against money. And that a 12-year-old girl's right to safety might prove stronger than a legal document signed by desperate men in a world that had forgotten how to protect its most vulnerable. When he reached the homestead, Cole found Emma exactly where he'd left her, sitting by the fire with the rifle across her knees. She looked up as he entered, searching his face for signs of hope or despair. "Well?" she asked. Cole hung his head on its peg and settled into his chair. "Well, turns out you've got more people willing to fight for you than Webb's got people willing to fight for him." Emma's eyes widened with something that might have been wonder. "People want to help me. People want to do what's right," Cole corrected gently. "And keeping you safe, keeping you free, that's what's right." For the first time since Webb's visit, Emma smiled. It was a small smile, fragile as morning frost, but real. And in that moment, Cole knew that whatever the next 7 days brought, they would face it together. Not as owner and property, but as family. On the 4th day of their 7-day reprieve, a wagon appeared on the horizon, moving slowly. As if the driver was uncertain of her destination or afraid of what she might find at the end of her journey. Cole spotted it first while checking the fence line, and something about the solitary figure hunched over the reins made him urge his horse toward home faster than usual. Emma was hanging laundry when the wagon finally pulled into the yard, and at the sight of the woman climbing down with careful pain movements. The wet shirt in Emma's hands fell forgotten to the dust. "Mama." The word came out as barely a whisper, as if speaking it too loudly might shatter the impossible vision before her. The woman was perhaps 30, but life had aged her in the way that grinding poverty and endless worry could age someone. Her dress was patched but clean. Her hair was strewn with premature gray, and her hands shook as she reached toward the daughter she thought was lost forever. Emma rose, she breathed, and then they were in each other's arms, both crying with the desperate relief of people who'd learned not to hope for miracles and then received one. Anyway, Cole stayed back, giving them space for a reunion he understood was sacred. But he watched carefully, noting the way Emma's mother, Sarah rose. She introduced herself when she could speak again. Moved with the careful deliberation of someone still healing from injuries, both physical and emotional. "I've been looking for you," Sarah said, stroking Emma's hair with trembling fingers. "Ever since I got free, I've been traveling from town to town, asking questions, following rumors. When I heard about what happened in Silverbrook, she looked up at Cole then, her eyes holding the kind of gratitude that went beyond words. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for saving my baby." Cole nodded, uncomfortable with praise for doing what any decent person should have done. "She's been saving me, too, if I'm being honest." Sarah smiled at that, the first genuine happiness Cole had seen in her weathered features. "She's always been like that, even when she was tiny, always trying to take care of everyone else." Over the next few hours, Cole learned Sarah's story in fragments shared between tears and laughter. She'd been sold alongside Emma and Tommy when their father's gambling debts reached impossible heights, but to a different buyer. A man who ran a boarding house in Denver that was barely more than a prison for women who had nowhere else to go. "I tried to fight it," Sarah said, her voice hollow with old pain. "Tried to keep us together, but they said families were trouble, that split up, we'd be more manageable." She'd spent 2 years in virtual slavery, working 18-hour days for no pay, while the boarding house owner took a cut of everything she earned through cooking, cleaning, and mending for his tenants. It was only when a fire damaged the building and forced everyone to relocate that Sarah had found her chance to slip away in the chaos. "I had Emma's button," Sarah said, reaching into her coat pocket and pulling out a small wooden button carved with a flower from her favorite dress. "I kept it with me the whole time, promised myself I'd find her and Tommy, and make us a family again." Emma took the button with reverent care, turning it over in her palm like a talisman. "Tommy carved this for me," she said softly. "Said every princess needed jewelry, even if we couldn't afford real jewels." The mention of Tommy brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. "I haven't found him yet. Asked everywhere, followed every lead. It's like he just disappeared." Cole saw the way Emma's face closed off at this news. Watched her carefully tuck the button into her pocket next to her heart. The reunion with her mother was a miracle, but the absence of her brother remained a wound that might never fully heal. "We'll keep looking," Cole said quietly. "Sometimes people turn up in the strangest places when you least expect it." Sarah looked at him with surprise, as if she hadn't dared hope that anyone else might care about finding her lost son. "You'd help us look for Tommy." "Family's family," Cole replied simply. "And it seems to me you're all family now." That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table sharing the first meal the three of them had eaten together, Sarah brought up the subject they'd all been avoiding. "Emma told me about the men who came," she said carefully. "About Webb's claim in the 7 days." Cole nodded grimly. 3 days left. "I've sent wires to every lawyer and judge I can think of, but Webb has money and connections," Sarah finished. "I know his type. They think owning papers makes them right." "We could run," Emma said quietly the first time she'd spoken since her mother's arrival. "All three of us head west. Find somewhere they'd never think to look." Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Running's what we've been doing for 2 years. Baby girl, I'm tired of running." "Then what do we do?" Emma asked. Cole had been thinking about this question for days, turning over possibilities and discarding them one by one. Most of the legal avenues seemed blocked by Webb's money and influence. But there was one option that might work. Risky, unkonventional, but potentially effective. "There's one thing we haven't tried," he said slowly. "Marriage." Both women stared at him in confusion. "Not me and Emma," Cole clarified quickly, seeing Sarah's protective instincts flare. "Me and you, Sarah. If we were married, I'd have legal guardianship rights over Emma. Webb's papers wouldn't mean much against a husband's claim to protect his stepchild." Sarah blinked, processing this unexpected proposal. "You do that, marry a stranger to save my daughter?" "Wouldn't be to save her," Cole said honestly. "Would be to save all of us. This place has been dead for 3 years. Ever since Mary passed, you two brought it back to life. Seems to me that's worth protecting." Emma looked between them, hope and uncertainty wearing in her expression. "But would it be real? The marriage? I mean." Cole and Sarah exchanged a long look across the table. In it was the recognition of two people who'd both lost everything and found something unexpected in the wreckage. "Real as we want it to be," Sarah said quietly. Real as kindness and respect in choosing to build something together can make Cole nodded. I'm not looking for romance. Sarah lost that part of myself when Mary died. But partnership, family, a home where people take care of each other. That I can donna stuck. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Cole's weathered face. You're sure about this? Once we say those vows, there's no taking them back without a lot of legal trouble. I'm sure, Cole said. Question is, are you? Sarah looked at Emma, who was watching them both with the intensity of someone whose entire future hung on this moment. Then she looked around the warm kitchen, taking in the evidence of the life Cole had built. The solid furniture, the well-stocked pantry, the sense of safety that permeated every corner of the house. Yes, she said finally. If you'll have us, Cole Mitchell. We'd be honored to be your family. They were married 2 days later in the Silverbrook courthouse with Tom Bradley and his wife serving as witnesses and the justice of the peace looking slightly bewildered by the rush ceremony. Emma stood between them wearing a new dress Sarah had somehow managed to acquire, her face radiant with the kind of joy that comes from seeing impossible dreams become reality. When Webb and his men arrived the next morning, exactly 7 days after their first visit, they found a very different situation than they'd expected. Cole met them at the gate with legal papers of his own, a marriage certificate, and guardianship documents that had been filed with the territorial court. She's my stepdaughter now, Cole said simply, handing Webb the papers. Legal and binding. Your claim's worthless. Webb's face went through several interesting color changes as he read the documents. This is fraud, he sputtered finally. A sham marriage designed to circumvent legitimate debt collection. Prove it, Cole replied calmly. Take it to court if you want, but until a judge says otherwise. Emma Rose Mitchell is under my protection as her legal guardian. Deputy Carlson studied the papers with the careful attention of a man who knew when he was outmaneuvered. These look legitimate, he said finally. Because they are, Cole replied. Reverend Blackwood made one last attempt at moral authority. This union was clearly contracted for convenience, not sanctity. The Lord frowns upon such arrangements. Sarah stepped onto the porch, then wearing one of Mary's dresses altered to fit her slender frame, her hair neatly braided, and her chin raised with quiet dignity. The Lord also frowns upon grown men buying children, she said clearly. I think he's more concerned with protecting the innocent than preserving your business arrangements. Webb stared at her for a long moment, recognizing something in her face that made his confidence waver. Sarah Beth Porter, he said slowly. I heard you died in Denver. Sorry to disappoint you, Sarah replied coolly. But as you can see, I'm very much alive and very much married to a man who won't let you hurt my daughter. There was a long, tense silence. Then Webb slowly folded the marriage certificate and handed it back to Cole. This isn't over, he said. But the words lack conviction. Yes, it is, Cole replied. And if I see you on my property again without an invitation, you'll regret it. After the men rode away, Cole, Zara, and Emma stood together on the porch, watching the dust settle behind their departing horses. Emma was the first to break the silence. Are we really safe now? She asked. Cole looked down at this child who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. Then at the woman who had chosen to trust him with her most precious treasure. They weren't the family he'd expected to have, but they were the family that fate and circumstance and their own brave choices had created. We're really safe, he said. All of us. And for the first time in longer than any of them could remember, that safety felt permanent, protected not just by legal documents, but by the unbreakable bonds of people who chosen to love and protect each other through whatever storms might come. They were home. 6 months after the wedding, life at the Mitchell homestead had settled into the comfortable rhythms of a real family. Sarah had proven herself not just a devoted mother, but a capable partner, managing the household finances with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to make every penny count. Emma had grown too in and gained the healthy roundness that came from regular meals and the absence of fear. She'd also begun attending the schoolhouse in Silverbrook 3 days a week, her quick mind soaking up reading and arithmetic with the hunger of someone who'd been denied education for too long. Cole found himself whistling again as he worked, something he hadn't done since Mary's death. The house felt alive in ways it hadn't for years, filled with Sarah's quiet humming and Emma's occasional laughter and the simple domestic sounds of people building a life together. It was Sarah who first smelt the smoke. "Cole," she called from the kitchen window where she was washing breakfast dishes. "Look toward the ridge." Cole stepped outside and immediately felt his stomach drop. A line of orange glow was moving across the eastern ridge like a slow-burning fuse, pushed by winds that had been building since before dawn. Wildfire in late summer was every rancher's nightmare. Unkontrollable, unpredictable, and capable of consuming everything a family had built in a matter of hours. "How close?" Sarah asked, joining him on the porch with Emma right behind her. Cole studied the smoke patterns and wind direction with the careful attention of someone who'd fought fire before. "Close enough. We need to move stock to the north pasture and get the important papers ready to travel." They spent the morning in controlled urgency, driving cattle away from the fire's likely path, while Emma helped Sarah pack their most precious belongings into wooden crates. The marriage certificate went in first, followed by Emma's button from Tommy and the few photographs that remained of their various pasts. By afternoon, the fire had jumped the ridge and was racing down the slope toward their valley with frightening speed. The sky had turned an ominous orange-brown, and ash began falling like gray snow on everything they'd worked to build. "We need to go," Cole said, loading the last of their emergency supplies into the wagon. "Fire's moving faster than I expected." But as they prepared to leave, Emma suddenly bolted toward the barn. "Emma!" Sarah screamed, but the girl was already inside the smoke-filled building. Cole ran after her, finding Emma in the tack room, frantically searching through old equipment. "What are you doing?" he shouted over the roar of approaching flames. "Tommy's letters," Emma cried, pulling a small wooden box from behind a saddle. "The ones he wrote me before, I hid them here so they'd be safe." Cole grabbed the box in Emma's hand, pulling her toward the door as burning embers began to fall through gaps in the barn roof. They made it to the wagon just as the wind shifted, sending the fire racing directly toward the house. They drove hard for the creek bottom, where the water might stop or slow the flames' advance. Behind them, the Mitchell homestead, their home, their sanctuary, their new beginning, disappeared into a wall of orange fury. They spent the night camped by the creek, watching their world burn. Emma sat between Cole and Sarah, all three of them covered in soot and ash, staring at the glow on the horizon that marked everything they'd lost. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered finally. "If I hadn't gone back for those stupid letters." "They weren't stupid," Sarah said firmly, pulling her daughter closer. "They were from Tommy. They mattered. Besides," Cole added, "house was already gone by then. Fire would have taken it whether you'd gone back or not." Emma opened the wooden box with trembling fingers, revealing a handful of carefully folded papers covered in a child's careful handwriting. She handed one to Sarah, who read it by the light of their campfire. "Dear Emmy," Sarah read aloud, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope this letter finds you safe and warm wherever you are. I dream about you every night and tell myself stories about the day we'll see each other again." She couldn't continue, overcome by the love that radiated from her son's words, even across the years and distance. "He's alive," Emma said with quiet certainty. "I can feel it, and someday we'll find him." Cole looked at these two remarkable women, his wife and daughter, chosen family forged in crisis and sealed with love. Und spürte, wie sich etwas in seiner Brust setzte. Das Haus konnte wieder aufgebaut, die Scheunen ersetzt werden, aber diese Verbindung zwischen ihnen, diese Entschlossenheit, trotz allem, was die Welt ihnen entgegenwarf, weiter zu hoffen, zu kämpfen und zu lieben, das war unzerbrechlich. Wir werden ihn finden, stimmte er zu. Und wenn wir es tun, werden wir ihm Geschichten darüber erzählen, wie seine Schwester seine Briefe vor einem Waldbrand rettete und seine Mutter einen sturen Rancher heiratete, der sie beide liebt. Am Morgen kehrten sie zurück, um den Schaden zu begutachten. Das Haus war verschwunden, reduziert auf ein geschwärztes Steinfundament und einen Schornstein, der wie ein Grabstein aufragte. Die Scheune war ein Totalschaden, ebenso wie der Großteil ihrer Ausrüstung und Vorräte. Doch das Land selbst blieb bestehen, gezeichnet, aber nicht zerstört, wartend auf die geduldige Arbeit des Wiederaufbaus. Tom Bradley traf noch vor Mittag mit einem Wagen voller Vorräte und 3 Nachbarn ein, die bereit waren, beim Aufräumen zu helfen. Bis zum Abend waren 6 weitere Familien mit Essen und Werkzeugen erschienen, in jener Art von praktischer Großzügigkeit, für die Grenzgemeinschaften bekannt waren. »Wir helfen euch beim Wiederaufbau«, sagte Tom schlicht. Das ist es, was Nachbarn tun. Als sie vor den Ruinen ihres alten Lebens standen, nahm Sarah Coles Hand. »Bist du sicher?« Wieder ganz von vorne anfangen. Cole sah Emma an, die bereits Pläne schmiedete, wo der neue Hühnerstall stehen sollte. Ihre Widerstandskraft war von vorübergehenden Rückschlägen ungebrochen. Dann sah er Sarah an, diese Frau, die Hunderte von Meilen gereist war, um ihre Kinder zu finden, und die ihn dabei selbst gerettet hatte. »Wir fangen nicht bei Null an«, sagte er. »Wir haben uns. Alles andere ist nur Bauarbeit.« Sie bauten den ganzen Herbst über und errichteten ein neues Haus, das größer war als das alte, groß genug für die Familie, von der sie hofften, dass sie weiter wachsen würde, und mit einem zusätzlichen Schlafzimmer für den Sohn, von dem sie fest glaubten, dass er eines Tages nach Hause kommen würde. Die Gemeinschaft half mit Arbeit und Material und schuf etwas Stärkeres und Schöneres, als das Feuer genommen hatte. Emma ging ab diesem Herbst Vollzeit zur Schule. Ihre Lehrerin staunte darüber, wie schnell sie Kinder einholte, die keinen einzigen Tag Bildung verpasst hatten. Sarah übernahm die Buchführung der Ranch komplett. Ihr sorgfältiges Management ermöglichte es ihnen, ihre Herde zu vergrößern und die Zucht zu verbessern. Und Cole lernte, dass Heilung zweimal in einem Leben stattfinden kann. Dass Liebe auf unerwartetem Boden wachsen kann. Und dass manchmal die besten Familien jene sind, die man sich aussucht, statt derer, in die man hineingeboren wurde. Am Weihnachtsmorgen, als sie um ihren neuen Kamin saßen, einfache Geschenke öffneten und jene Art von Lachen teilten, die aus echter Zufriedenheit entspringt, machte Emma eine Ankündigung, die alle überraschte. »Ich möchte meinen Namen ändern«, sagte sie. »Offiziell. Emma Rose Mitchell. Ich möchte für immer hierher gehören.« Sarahs Augen füllten sich mit Tränen. »Schatz, du gehörst bereits hierher. Du brauchst keine Papiere, um das zu beweisen.« »Ich weiß«, sagte Emma. »Aber ich will die Papiere trotzdem. Ich möchte, dass jeder weiß, dass Cole mein Papa ist und dies mein Zuhause ist und mich niemand jemals wieder wegnehmen kann.« Cole spürte, wie sich seine Kehle vor Emotionen zuschnürte. Dieses Kind, dieses tapfere, unglaubliche Kind hatte ihn genauso sicher gewählt, wie er sie an jenem Tag hinter dem Saloon gewählt hatte, und nun wollte sie, dass die Welt es erfährt. »Nun denn«, sagte er mit belegter Stimme, »ich schätze, dann sollten wir es offiziell machen.« Sie reichten die Adoptionspapiere am Neujahrstag 1886 ein, mit Emma Rose Mitchell sorgfältig geübter und stolz geschriebener Unterschrift. Als sie das Gerichtsgebäude verließen, schob Emma ihre kleine Hand in Coles schwielige Handfläche. »Danke, Papa«, sagte sie schlicht. Cole drückte ihre Hand sanft. »Danke, dass du mich gewählt hast, Tochter.« Und irgendwo im weiten Wyoming-Territorium, an einem Ort, den sich noch keiner von ihnen vorstellen konnte, erzählte ein junger Mann namens Tommy Rose anderen verlorenen Kindern Geschichten über den Tag, an dem Familien wieder vereint und zerbrochene Dinge wieder heil gemacht werden konnten. Die Geschichte war noch lange nicht zu Ende. Aber dieses Kapitel, dieses wunderschöne, unmögliche Kapitel über Liebe, die Grausamkeit besiegt, und Familie, die über die Tragödie triumphiert, war genauso, wie es sein sollte. Sie waren zu Hause. Sie waren in Sicherheit. Sie waren zusammen. Und das, so wusste Cole Mitchell, während er seine gewählte Familie betrachtete, war mehr wert als all das Gold in den Gebirgsbächen und all das Vieh in den endlosen Ebenen. Sie hatten alles, was zählte. Bis 1890 war Emma Rose Mitchell zu einer jungen Frau von 7 Jahren herangewachsen, mit der stillen Stärke ihrer Mutter und dem unerschütterlichen Gerechtigkeitssinn ihres Adoptivvaters. Das verängstigte, gebrochene Kind, das hinter einem Saloon in Silverbrook an einen Pfosten gebunden worden war, hatte sich in jemanden verwandelt, der die Zuversicht eines Menschen ausstrahlte, der wusste, dass er bedingungslos geliebt wurde. Ihr dunkles Haar fing das Sonnenlicht wie Seide ein. Ihre Augen bargen die Intelligenz, die aus Bildung und Chancen resultierte. Und ihre Hände, einst dünn vor Hunger, waren nun ruhig und fähig durch jahrelange sinnvolle Arbeit. Das Mitchell-Heimwesen florierte über alle Erwartungen hinaus. Coles sorgfältiges Zuchtprogramm hatte einige der feinsten Rinder im Wyoming-Territorium hervorgebracht, und Sarahs akribische Finanzverwaltung hatte es ihnen ermöglicht, zusätzliches Land zu kaufen und ihren Betrieb auszuweiten. Wichtiger noch: Ihr Zuhause war zu einem Leuchtturm der Hoffnung für Familien in Krisen in der gesamten Region geworden. Doch trotz all ihres Erfolgs und Glücks blieb Tommys Abwesenheit ein Schmerz in Emmas Herzen, den die Zeit nicht gelindert hatte. Jeder Brief, der im Postamt ankam, ließ ihren Puls vor Hoffnung schneller schlagen. Jeder Fremde, der durch Silverbrook ritt, erregte ihre Aufmerksamkeit, während sie in bekannten Zügen nach Spuren des Bruders suchte, an den sie sich erinnerte. Jede Nacht flüsterte sie vor dem Einschlafen Gebete für seine Sicherheit. Es war Sarah, die zuerst vorschlug, Tommy aktiver zu suchen. »Du bist jetzt alt genug, um die Wahrheit zu erfahren«, sagte sie Emma eines Abends, als sie gemeinsam im Garten arbeiteten und die letzten Tomaten vor dem ersten Frost ernteten. »Und wir haben Ressourcen, die wir früher nicht hatten. Vielleicht ist es an der Zeit, nicht mehr darauf zu warten, dass Tommy uns findet, sondern selbst nach ihm zu suchen.« Cole blickte von den Zaunpfählen auf, die er gerade reparierte. Der Vorschlag überraschte ihn nicht. Er hatte schon seit Monaten dasselbe gedacht. Emma war zu jemandem herangewachsen, der eine Aufgabe jenseits der Ranch brauchte, und die Suche nach ihrem Bruder würde ihr die Art von bedeutungsvoller Mission geben, die zu ihrer rastlosen Intelligenz passte. »Ich habe darüber nachgedacht, einen Detektiv zu engagieren«, sagte Cole und legte seinen Hammer ab. »Ein Mann namens Harrison Bradley, nicht verwandt mit dem Prediger, der uns Ärger gemacht hat. Er arbeitet von Denver aus. War früher bei den Pinkertons, bevor er seine eigene Agentur gründete. Er ist darauf spezialisiert, vermisste Personen zu finden.« Emmas Hände hielten an den Tomatenranken inne. »Würdet ihr das tun?« »So viel Geld ausgeben, Emma Rose«, sagte Sarah sanft. »Du bist unsere Tochter. Deinen Bruder zu finden, ist kein Geld ausgeben. Es ist eine Investition in die Zukunft unserer Familie«, Cole nickte zustimmend. »Außerdem können wir es uns jetzt leisten. Und wenn es irgendeine Chance gibt, dass Tommy da draußen genauso nach dir sucht wie du nach ihm, sind wir es euch beiden schuldig, alles zu versuchen.« Diesen Herbst traf Harrison Bradley auf dem Mitchell-Anwesen ein kompakter, scharfäugiger Mann in den 40ern, der die vorsichtige Wachsamkeit von jemandem ausstrahlte, der Jahre damit verbracht hatte, Menschen aufzuspüren, die nicht gefunden werden wollten. Er hörte Emmas Geschichte mit professioneller Aufmerksamkeit zu, machte sich detaillierte Notizen und stellte Fragen, die sowohl Gründlichkeit als auch Sensibilität bewiesen. »Die Spur ist kalt«, sagte er ehrlich, nachdem Emma ihm Tommys Briefe gezeigt und alles beschrieben hatte, woran sie sich bezüglich ihrer Trennung erinnerte. 5 Jahre sind eine lange Zeit, und Kinder, die in die Arbeit verkauft wurden, neigen dazu, in den Schatten zu verschwinden. Aber ich habe schon Leute mit weniger Anhaltspunkten gefunden.« »Was brauchen Sie von uns?«, fragte Cole. Bradley holte eine Ledermappe hervor und breitete mehrere Dokumente auf dem Küchentisch aus. »Erstens muss diese Geschichte in jeder Zeitung zwischen hier und Kalifornien erzählt werden. Vermisstenanzeigen, Belohnungsangebote, alles, was jemanden erreichen könnte, der ihn gesehen oder mit ihm gearbeitet hat. Zweitens muss ich seine Bewegungen von Anfang an zurückverfolgen. Jeden ausfindig machen, der am ursprünglichen Verkauf beteiligt war. Jeder Spur nachgehen, egal wie klein sie ist.« Emma studierte die Entwürfe der Zeitungsanzeigen, die Bradley mitgebracht hatte. Was, wenn er nicht gefunden werden will? Was, wenn er sich irgendwo ein neues Leben aufgebaut hat und keine Erinnerungen an das alte möchte? Es war eine Frage, die sowohl Reife als auch jene tiefe Liebe offenbarte, die das Glück eines anderen vor das eigene Verlangen stellt. Bradley sah sie mit neuem Respekt an. »Das ist immer eine Möglichkeit«, sagte er ehrlich. »Aber nach dem, was Sie mir über Ihren Bruder erzählt haben, klingt er wie jemand, der nie aufhören würde, nach seiner Familie zu suchen. Die meisten Menschen in seiner Situation verbringen ihr ganzes Leben damit, genau auf das zu hoffen, was ich hier anbiete, die Chance, nach Hause zu kommen.« In den folgenden Monaten begann Bradleys Untersuchung Früchte zu tragen. Er spürte Caleb Porter, Emmas und Tommys Vater, in einem Armengrab in Colorado auf, gestorben an Trunk und Verzweiflung, 2 Jahre nachdem er seine Kinder verkauft hatte. Er fand Marcus Webb, der nun selbst ein gebrochener Mann war und eine Haftstrafe in einem Territorialgefängnis wegen Betrugs und Unterschlagung verbüßte. Vor allem aber begann er, das Netzwerk von Männern zurückzuverfolgen, die in der gesamten Region Kinder gekauft und verkauft hatten. Das Bild, das sich abzeichnete, war sowohl herzzerreißend als auch empörend. Dutzende Kinder waren durch dasselbe System verschleppt worden, das Emma und Tommy zum Opfer gefallen waren. Einige wurden verkauft, um in Minen zu arbeiten, andere als unbezahlte Arbeitskräfte auf abgelegenen Ranches, wieder andere verschwanden im anonymen Elend städtischer Slums. Doch Bradley fand auch Hoffnung. Ein ehemaliger Telegrafist in Colorado erinnerte sich an einen jungen Mann namens Thomas, der 1888 kurzzeitig für die Eisenbahn gearbeitet hatte. Ein Lehrer in Utah erinnerte sich an einen Schülerhelfer, der außergewöhnlich gut mit Zahlen umgehen konnte und oft von einer Schwester namens Emma gesprochen hatte. Ein Zeitungsherausgeber in Nevada hatte jemanden beschäftigt, der auf Tommys Beschreibung passte und mit ungewöhnlicher Leidenschaft und Geschicklichkeit Artikel über vermisste Personen geschrieben hatte. Er lebt, berichtete Bradley bei einem seiner Besuche auf dem Anwesen. Und er hat nach dir gesucht, Emma. Jeden Job, den er annahm, wählte er so, dass er Zugang zu Informationen hatte, Telegrafenleitungen, Zeitungen, Schulen, wo er von anderen verlorenen Kindern hören könnte. Er hat seine eigene Suche durchgeführt. Emma spürte, wie sich etwas in ihrer Brust löste, von dem sie gar nicht gewusst hatte, dass es fest angespannt war. Wie finden wir ihn? Wir machen es ihm leichter, uns zu finden, sagte Bradley schlicht. Wir setzen deine Geschichte in jede Zeitung westlich des Mississippi. Wir bieten eine Belohnung an, die groß genug ist, um Aufmerksamkeit zu erregen, und wir warten darauf, dass er zu uns kommt. Die Kampagne begann ernsthaft im Frühjahr 1891. Emmas Geschichte erschien in Zeitungen von Denver bis San Francisco, immer begleitet von demselben Foto. Emma mit 17 Jahren, stehend zwischen Cole und Sarah auf der Veranda ihres wiederaufgebauten Hauses, ihr Gesicht geprägt von der Stärke, die sie gewonnen, und der Hoffnung, die sie sich bewahrt hatte. Die Resonanz war überwältigend. Briefe trafen ein von Menschen, die junge Männer gesehen hatten, die auf Tommys Beschreibung passten, von anderen Familien, die nach verlorenen Kindern suchten. Von Personen, die selbst in die Arbeit verkauft worden waren und ihre Geschichten teilen wollten. Emma beantwortete jeden Brief persönlich. Ihr Briefwechsel wurde zu einer Lebensader für Menschen im gesamten Westen, die ähnliche Tragödien erlebt hatten. Doch es war ein Brief eines Zeitungsherausgebers aus Carson City, Nevada, der alles veränderte. Miss Mitchell, hieß es in dem Brief, ich glaube, der junge Mann, den Sie suchen, hat 1890 einige Monate für meine Zeitung, den Carson City Chronicle, gearbeitet. Er nannte sich Thomas Porter, erwähnte nie eine Schwester namens Emma, aber seine Texte zeigten ein ungewöhnliches Interesse an Geschichten über getrennte Familien. Er ging letzten Frühling plötzlich weg und sagte, er habe einen Hinweis erhalten, dem er nachgehen müsse. Ich habe noch einige seiner Artikel, falls Sie diese sehen möchten. Emma las diesen Brief so oft, dass das Papier an den Knicken dünn wurde. Hier war der Beweis, dass Tommy nicht nur am Leben war, sondern immer noch suchte, immer noch hoffte und immer noch daran glaubte, dass es sich lohnte, die Familie über jede Distanz hinweg zu verfolgen. Cole und Bradley reisten gemeinsam nach Carson City und kehrten mit einer Mappe voller Artikel zurück, die Tommy geschrieben hatte, Stücke über vermisste Personen, wiedervereinte Familien und die rechtlichen Reformen, die zum Schutz von Kindern vor Ausbeutung nötig waren. Emma erkannte die Stimme ihres Bruders in jeder Zeile, dieselbe Intelligenz und dasselbe Mitgefühl, das sie durch ihre dunkelsten Nächte als Kinder getröstet hatte. Er zieht nach Osten, schlussfolgerte Bradley nach dem Studium des Zeitplans von Tommys Bewegungen. Er folgt Hinweisen, jagt Gerüchten nach. Die Frage ist, ob er noch reist oder ob er sich irgendwo niedergelassen hat, um seine Suche fortzusetzen. Da machte Sarah den Vorschlag, der ihre Familie letztendlich zusammenbringen sollte. Was, wenn wir aufhören, ihn zu jagen, und anfangen, ihn nach Hause zu rufen, sagte sie eines Abends, als sie am Feuer saßen und ihren nächsten Schritt planten. Was, wenn wir seine eigene Strategie gegen ihn verwenden, was meinst du damit? Fragte Emma. Sarah lächelte mit der stillen Genugtuung von jemandem, der gerade ein komplexes Rätsel gelöst hatte. Dein Bruder schreibt über vermisste Personen und Familienzusammenführungen. Was, wenn wir ihm eine Geschichte geben, die zu gut ist, um sie zu ignorieren? Was, wenn wir dafür sorgen, dass Emmas Adoptionsgeschichte als herzerwärmender Beitrag in jeder größeren Zeitung erscheint? Nicht als Vermisstenanzeige, sondern als inspirierende Erzählung über eine Familie, die Liebe über das Blut stellt. Cole verstand sofort die Brillanz des Plans. Tommy liest Zeitungen beruflich. Wenn Emmas Geschichte in genügend Blättern erscheint, besonders mit Details, die nur er erkennen würde, dann wird er wissen, dass ich es wirklich bin, beendete Emma den Satz, ihre Stimme hell vor Aufregung. Und er wird genau wissen, wo er mich finden kann. Sie setzten Sarahs Plan in diesem Sommer um. Emmas Geschichte, sorgfältig so verfasst, dass sie Details enthielt, die nur Tommy erkennen würde, der geschnitzte Holzknopf, die Lieder, die er früher gesungen hatte, die spezifische Art, wie er sie immer Emmy statt Emma genannt hatte, all das wurde in eine Erzählung verwoben, die als Leuchtturm für den Bruder dienen sollte, der nie aufgehört hatte zu suchen. Bis zum Herbst empfing das Mitchell-Anwesen Besucher aus dem gesamten Territorium. Reporter, die die Geschichte weiterverfolgen wollten, andere Familien, die von ihrem Beispiel inspiriert waren, Reisende, die von ihrer Gastfreundschaft gehört hatten und sie selbst erleben wollten. Emma ging mit jedem Besucher würdevoll und mit wachsendem Selbstbewusstsein um. Doch Cole konnte die Anspannung sehen, die sich in ihr aufbaute, während die Tage vergingen, ohne dass ein Wort von Tommy kam. Während dieser geschäftigen Zeit traf Emma eine Entscheidung, die alle überraschte, sie selbst eingeschlossen. Ich möchte anfangen zu unterrichten, verkündete sie eines Abends beim Abendessen. Das neue Schulhaus in Silverbrook braucht eine zweite Lehrkraft, und ich glaube, ich könnte Kindern helfen, die das durchgemacht haben, was ich erlebt habe. Cole und Sarah tauschten Blicke aus. Sie hatten immer gewusst, dass Emma die Ranch irgendwann verlassen würde. Sie war zu intelligent und ehrgeizig, um sich nur mit dem häuslichen Leben zufrieden zu geben. Aber sie hatten erwartet, dass sie erst heiraten oder vielleicht die Krankenpflege oder einen anderen traditionell weiblichen Beruf ergreifen würde. Lehrerin ist ein guter Beruf für eine Frau, sagte Cole vorsichtig. Aber bist du sicher, dass du bereit bist? Es ist eine große Verantwortung. Emmas Kinn hob sich mit jener sturen Entschlossenheit, die sie beide kannten. Ich bin bereit, seit ich 12 Jahre alt war und hinter einem Salon an einen Pfosten gebunden wurde. Ich weiß, wie es ist, sich machtlos und verlassen zu fühlen. Ich möchte sicherstellen, dass sich kein Kind in diesem Territorium in meinem Klassenzimmer jemals so fühlt. Sarah reichte über den Tisch und drückte die Hand ihrer Tochter. Dann werden wir dir helfen, die Stelle zu bekommen. Und wenn Tommy nach Hause kommt, wird er seine Schwester vorfinden, wie sie einen Unterschied in der Welt macht. Emma begann diesen Herbst zu unterrichten, sie ging 3 Tage die Woche nach Silverbrook und wohnte an den Schultagen bei der Familie des Pfarrers. Ihr Klassenzimmer wurde im gesamten Territorium für seine Wärme und Inklusivität bekannt. Sie hatte eine besondere Gabe dafür, Kinder zu erreichen, die als schwierig oder unbelehrbar abgestempelt worden waren, und Eltern begannen darum zu bitten, dass ihre schwierigsten Kleinen in Miss Mitchells Obhut gegeben wurden. Doch was vielleicht noch wichtiger war, Emmas Arbeit gab ihr eine Plattform, um über Kindeswohl und Kinderschutz zu sprechen. Sie wurde eine einflussreiche Fürsprecherin für die Territorialgesetze, an deren Verabschiedung Cole mitgewirkt hatte, und reiste in andere Gemeinden, um ihre Geschichte zu teilen und lokale Beamte zu ermutigen, Kindesmissbrauch ernst zu nehmen. Während eines dieser Vorträge im Frühjahr 1892 lernte Emma Dr. James Thompson kennen, einen jungen Arzt aus Boston, der in den Westen gekommen war, um Praxen in unterversorgten Gemeinden aufzubauen. Er besuchte ihren Vortrag in Cheyenne, blieb danach, um nachdenkliche Fragen über Trauma und Heilung zu stellen, und ging mit offensichtlicher Bewunderung sowohl für ihre Botschaft als auch für die Frau, die sie verkündete. Ihr Werben fand weitgehend per Brief statt. James baute seine Praxis in einer 50 Meilen entfernten Stadt auf. Doch Cole und Sarah konnten die Veränderung bei Emma sehen, als der Briefwechsel tiefer wurde. Sie lächelte öfter, summte bei der Arbeit und begann über die Zukunft mit einer Art von Begeisterung zu sprechen, die vermuten ließ, dass sie nicht mehr nur darauf wartete, dass ihre Vergangenheit sie einholte. Er ist ein guter Mann, erzählte Emma ihnen, nachdem James die Ranch zum ersten Mal besucht hatte. Er versteht, dass Familie mehr ist als nur Blut, dass man aus schwierigen Anfängen etwas Bedeutungsvolles aufbauen kann. Cole mochte den jungen Arzt sofort, zum Teil wegen seiner offensichtlichen Ergebenheit gegenüber Emma, aber vor allem wegen der Art, wie er zuhörte, wenn Emma über ihre Arbeit und ihre Träume sprach. James deutete nie an, dass die Ehe ihre Lehrerkarriere beenden oder ihre Interessenvertretung einschränken sollte. Stattdessen sprach er über Möglichkeiten, wie sie ihre Bemühungen kombinieren könnten, sein medizinisches Wissen und ihre Erfahrung nutzend, um Programme zum Schutz gefährdeter Kinder zu schaffen. Als James im Sommer 1893 um ihre Hand anhielt, sagte Emma Ja mit dem Segen von Eltern, die gelernt hatten, dem Urteil ihrer Tochter zu vertrauen. Doch sie machte auch klar, dass die Hochzeit warten würde, bis Tommy nach Hause käme. Ich werde mein neues Leben nicht beginnen, bevor mein altes Leben vollständig ist, sagte sie schlicht. Tommy muss mich zum Altar führen, oder ich heirate überhaupt nicht. Es war eine Entscheidung, die manch anderen Mann frustriert hätte. Doch James verstand. Er hatte zu viel von der Welt gesehen, um zu glauben, dass Liebe überstürzt werden könne oder dass Familienbande leicht zu ersetzen seien. Wenn Emma auf ihren Bruder warten musste, dann würden sie gemeinsam warten. Als 1894 in das Jahr 1895 überging, wurde das Warten fast unerträglich. Emma und James waren tief verliebt und bereit, ihr gemeinsames Leben zu beginnen, aber gebunden durch Emmas unerschütterliche Loyalität gegenüber dem Bruder, der sie in ihren dunkelsten Zeiten beschützt hatte. Weiterhin trafen Briefe von Menschen ein, die junge Männer gesehen hatten, die Tommy ähnelten, doch keiner der Hinweise führte zum Erfolg. Dann, Anfang Oktober 1895, änderte sich alles. Ein Telegramm traf im Telegrafenamt von Silverbrook ein, adressiert an Emma Rose Mitchell. Es war kurz, fast kryptisch, aber Emma erkannte die Stimme sofort. Emmy, höre auf zu suchen. Komme nach Hause. Dein Bruder. Tommy. Emma starrte auf das Telegramm, bis die Worte vor Tränen verschwammen. Nach 10 Jahren der Suche, 5 Jahren aktiver Untersuchung und einem Leben voller Hoffnung kam ihr Bruder endlich nach Hause. Sie rannte vom Telegrafenamt zum Schulhaus, wo sie ihren verblüfften Schülern verkündete, dass die Schule früher endete. Dann ritt sie so schnell wie nie zuvor zur Ranch und platzte mit Neuigkeiten ins Haus, die ihre Familie vervollständigen und ein Versprechen erfüllen würden, dass Liebe jede Trennung überwinden kann. Er kommt, rief sie Cole und Sarah zu und schwenkte das Telegramm wie eine Siegesfahne. Tommy kommt nach Hause. Sarah sank auf einen Stuhl, überwältigt von Erleichterung und Freude. Cole johlte mit einem Enthusiasmus, der alle überraschte, ihn selbst und Emma eingeschlossen. Emma begann, ein Heimkommen zu planen, das ihrem Bruder beweisen würde, dass die Familie, von der er in ihren dunkelsten Stunden geträumt hatte, alles geworden war, was er sich erhofft hatte. Der Junge, der Holzknöpfe geschnitzt und Schlaflieder gesungen hatte, kam nach Hause und würde vorfinden, dass seine kleine Schwester zu einer Frau herangewachsen war, die Leben veränderte. Dass seine Mutter Liebe und Sicherheit gefunden hatte. Und dass die Familie, an die er nie aufgehört hatte zu glauben, bereit war, ihn mit offenen Armen und Herzen voller Dankbarkeit für seine sichere Rückkehr willkommen zu heißen. Der Kreis war endlich bereit, sich zu schließen. 10 Jahre später, im goldenen Herbst von 1905, fanden Besucher des Mitchell-Anwesens eine der wohlhabendsten und einladendsten Ranches im Wyoming-Territorium vor. Das Haus, das aus der Asche des Feuers von 1885 auferstanden war, war zu einem weitläufigen Heim mit breiten Veranden und Fenstern gewachsen, die jeden Sonnenstrahl einfingen. Die Scheunen waren rot gestrichen, die Zäune verliefen schnurgerade, und das Lachen von Kindern hallte über die Weiden, auf denen preisgekröntes Vieh zufrieden graste. Doch das Bemerkenswerteste an der Familie Mitchell war das, was an jenem klaren Oktobermorgen 1895 geschehen war, als der Kreis endlich vervollständigt wurde. Ein einsamer Reiter hatte sich dem Gehöft genähert, trotz offensichtlicher Erschöpfung aufrecht im Sattel, seine Kleidung staubig von langer Reise. Als er am Tor absattelte und seinen Hut abnahm, um dunkles Haar und Augen zu enthüllen, die Intelligenz, Humor und die vorsichtige Kraft des Überlebens bargen, ließ Emma Rose Mitchell ihren Apfelkorb fallen und flüsterte ein einziges Wort, das alles veränderte: Tommy, der junge Mann. 26 Jahre alt und von der hageren Statur jemanden gezeichnet, der hart für alles gearbeitet hatte, brach in ein Grinsen aus, das seine verwitterten Züge verwandelte. »Hallo, Emmy. Tut mir leid, dass ich spät dran bin.« Thomas Mitchell, wie er sich nun nannte, hatte 10 Jahre damit verbracht, sich nach Westen vorzuarbeiten, Gerüchten zu folgen und Spuren zu verfolgen, wobei er nie die Hoffnung aufgab, die Schwester zu finden, die er geliebt und verloren hatte. Er hatte als Telegrafist, Zeitungsreporter, Lehrer und in einem Dutzend anderer Jobs gearbeitet, immer auf der Suche nach Nachrichten über ein Mädchen namens Emma, das zusammen mit ihrem Bruder in einem missglückten Pokerspiel verkauft worden war. Es war ein Bericht in der Zeitung von Cheyenne über den Territorialabgeordneten Cole Mitchell und seine erfolgreiche Kampagne für Kinderschutzgesetze gewesen, der ihm schließlich den entscheidenden Hinweis gegeben hatte. »Ich las über einen Mann namens Mitchell, der ein Mädchen namens Emma Rose adoptiert hatte«, erklärte er in jener ersten Nacht. Die Familie saß um den Tisch wie Puzzleteile, die sich endlich zusammenfügten. »Ich wusste, dass du es sein musstest. Die Wiedervereinigung war alles, wovon Emma geträumt hatte und mehr.« Innerhalb eines Monats nach Tommys Rückkehr heirateten Emma und Dr. James Thompson schließlich in einer Zeremonie, die die Kirche von Silverbrook bis zum Überlaufen füllte. Tommy führte seine Schwester den Gang entlang, während ihm Tränen über das Gesicht liefen. Und als der Pfarrer fragte, wer diese Frau zur Ehe gäbe, klang seine Stimme klar und stolz: »Ihre Familie tut das. Wir alle zusammen.« Thomas blieb natürlich. Er heiratete eine örtliche Lehrerin namens Margaret, gründete den Silverbrook Chronicle und wurde zum Chronisten der Familie. Er hielt nicht nur ihre Geschichte fest, sondern auch die Geschichten anderer Familien, die durch Umstände außerhalb ihrer Kontrolle auseinandergerissen und durch Liebe, Entschlossenheit und den einfachen, radikalen Akt, die Hoffnung nicht aufzugeben, wieder aufgebaut wurden. Emma Rose Mitchell Thompson war zu einer bemerkenswerten Frau herangewachsen, die den Schuldienst mit der Erziehung von 3 wunderschönen Kindern und der Hilfe beim Betrieb der Ranch vereinbarte. Sarah war zur inoffiziellen Mutter von Silverbrook geworden, ihr silbernes Haar und ihre hellen Augen kennzeichneten sie als jemanden, der sowohl Verlust als auch Erneuerung verstand. Cole war zu jener Art von respektiertem Ältesten gereift, den Grenzgemeinschaften schätzten, ein Mann, dessen Wort Gesetz war und dessen Haus immer offen stand für jeden, der in Not war. Das Mitchell-Heimwesen wurde im gesamten Territorium legendär, nicht nur wegen seines Wohlstands, sondern wegen seiner offenen Türen. Weggelaufene Kinder, misshandelte Ehefrauen, Männer, die vom Glück verlassen waren, Familien, die durch Tragödien getrennt wurden, sie alle fanden ihren Weg zu Coles und Sarahs Tisch, wo niemand hungrig weggeschickt wurde und jeder mit der Würde behandelt wurde, die jedes menschliche Wesen verdient. Die Holzkiste mit Tommys Briefen wurde in ihrem Salon ausgestellt, neben Emmas geschnitzten Knopf und einem Foto des ursprünglichen Gehöfts vor dem Feuer. Diese Artefakte erzählten die Geschichte einer Familie, die zerbrochen und verstreut worden war und dann durch die revolutionäre Kraft der Entscheidung, einander zu lieben und zu beschützen, stärker als je zuvor wieder aufgebaut wurde. Cole Mitchell wurde 78 Jahre alt, lange genug, um seine Enkelkinder aufwachsen und eigene Familien gründen zu sehen. Sarah folgte ihm nur 2 Jahre später, sie konnte sich eine Welt ohne den Mann nicht vorstellen, der ihren Wert erkannt hatte, als sie ihn selbst nicht sehen konnte. Sie wurden Seite an Seite auf dem Hügel begraben, der die Ranch überblickte, unter Grabsteinen mit einer einfachen Inschrift: Sie retteten einander. Emma und Thomas führten die Familientradition fort, die Schwachen zu schützen und für Gerechtigkeit zu kämpfen. Die Kinderschutzgesetze, an deren Verabschiedung Cole mitgewirkt hatte, wurden gestärkt und ausgeweitet, wodurch ein rechtlicher Rahmen geschaffen wurde, der die Art von systematischem Missbrauch verhinderte, die ihre Familie beinahe zerstört hätte. Doch das vielleicht wichtigste Erbe der Familie Mitchell war der Beweis, den sie erbrachten: dass Familien aus Liebe statt nur aus Blut gebaut werden können. Dass Heilung immer möglich ist, egal wie tief die Wunden sind. Und dass die tiefgreifendsten Rettungen manchmal passieren, wenn gebrochene Menschen sich entscheiden, einander zu retten. Während die Kamera ein letztes Mal über das weitläufige Mitchell-Heimwesen schwenkt, sehen wir 3 Generationen, die sich zum Sonntagsessen auf der Vorderveranda versammelt haben. Kinder spielen im Hof, wo Emma einst stand, zerbrochen und verängstigt. Lachen halt durch dasselbe Tal, in dem ein verzweifelter Rancher einst eine Wahl traf, die alles veränderte. Die untergehende Sonne malt den Himmel von Wyoming in Gold- und Purpurtönen. Und irgendwo in der Ferne spricht das Rufen der Rinder von Leben, das weitergeht, von Hoffnung, die Bestand hat, und von Liebe, die alles besiegt. Emma Rose Mitchell lernte, dass sie es wert war, um sie zu kämpfen, sie zu beschützen und sie bedingungslos zu lieben. Ihre Geschichte beweist, dass jedes Kind Sicherheit verdient. Jede Familie verdient die Chance auf Heilung. Und jeder Mensch, egal wie klein oder machtlos er erscheinen mag, hat das Potenzial, die Welt zu verändern, einfach indem er sich weigert, die Hoffnung aufzugeben. Aber hier ist, was ich von Ihnen wissen möchte. Was würden Sie tun, wenn Sie heute einem Kind in Emmas Situation begegnen würden? Waren Sie jemals Teil einer Wahlfamilie, die bewiesen hat, dass Liebe stärker ist als Blut? Haben Sie erlebt, wie das Leben eines Menschen durch einen einzigen Akt der Freundlichkeit völlig verwandelt wurde? Schreiben Sie Ihre Gedanken in die Kommentare unten und sagen Sie uns, von wo aus Sie zuschauen. Ob Sie in Wyoming sind wie unsere Helden, irgendwo anders im amerikanischen Westen oder auf der halben Welt, denn Geschichten wie die der Mitchells erinnern uns daran, dass Mut, Mitgefühl und die Kraft, Leben zu verändern, überall existieren, in jeder Gemeinschaft, in jedem von uns. Wenn diese Geschichte Sie bewegt hat, drücken Sie den Abonnieren-Button und die Glocke, denn jede Woche bringen wir Ihnen unglaubliche wahre Geschichten von gewöhnlichen Menschen, die sich entschieden haben, Außergewöhnliches zu tun. Teilen Sie dieses Video mit jemandem, der daran erinnert werden muss, dass seine Geschichte noch nicht zu Ende ist, dass Heilung möglich ist und dass manchmal die Familie, die wir uns aussuchen, die Familie wird, die uns rettet. Wenn Sie das nächste Mal jemanden sehen, der Hilfe braucht, denken Sie an Cole Mitchell, wie er hinter diesen Saloon in Silverbrook ging. Denken Sie daran, dass Sie die Kraft haben, für jemanden der Wendepunkt zu sein, die zweite Chance, das Wunder. Denn die besten Geschichten handeln nicht nur von den Helden, die wir bewundern. Sie handeln davon, den Helden in sich selbst zu erkennen und den Unterschied, den eine einzige Person durch einen Akt der Liebe bewirken kann. Danke, dass Sie uns auf dieser unglaublichen Reise durch die amerikanische Pionierzeit begleitet haben, wo Liebe die Grausamkeit besiegte und die Familie über die Tragödie triumphierte. Bis zum nächsten Mal, glauben Sie weiter an die Kraft der Wahlfamilie, an zweite Chancen und an die unzerbrechliche Stärke des menschlichen Geistes.